Warning: the following broadcast is not approved by your teacher, university, politician, or government. Side effects may include skepticism, better reasoning skills, liberty, peace, and an escape from the woke.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Been Awake. I am your host, LB Muniz, and I am here. Well, we're here to engage in the mission of better sense making. If you don't know what that is yet, if you're new to the program, stick around. I think you'll enjoy the type of content we produce here. And of course, right off the bat, if you're new, make sure you hit subscribe on whatever platform you're watching this on. Go to beenawake.com, subscribe with your email. That way you get everything first. So if you're listening to this, it means you're probably already subscribed to the podcast feed, because now I'm putting out videos on YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter a week after I release something. And check out and stay tuned for new episodes every Sunday. Maybe late Sunday, but there's going to be a new episode every Sunday. We don't really have, I didn't really write, I have an article I'm finishing about the 2024 presidential primary, and kind of how I think the average person, and even those of us who pay very close attention to the realm of politics, how we should be approaching the 2024 debate. Of course, there's layers within that story, but that's not what we're going to do in this episode. Part of the new show format is I'm going to try to keep things a little on the shorter side, a lot easier for editing, and I think it also, I don't know, everybody does hour podcasts, and I enjoy doing hour podcasts at time, but you're busy, and so I want to make sure I condense the content into the best format that I can for you. So here we go. In today's episode, I did get some feedback, and so in today's episode, what we are going to be doing is having a little fun at other people's expense. And of course, we're going to be going through the types of we're going to let it touch on philosophy. We're going to let it touch on the different topics that we discuss here on the show. But as I was reminded, at the beginning, the intro series says, or at the end, I am not one with the woke. We're here to the show is an escape from the woke, and one way in which we can escape this woke paradigm. And what's kind of funny is it's fascinating the way, language changes these days. What's funny is that now it almost we're almost 3 years into beenawake.com, 2-3 years. And the term woke is almost, it's not that it's fallen out of favor per se, but it's gained such a popularity that as I've demonstrated multiple times on the show, as it's gained popularity, the term becomes watered down. However, in general, we know what we mean when we're talking about woke. We're talking about it is the amalgam of modern leftism, specifically in that it relates to intersectionality and queer theory and Marxism and all these other left-wing ideologies that have been the scourge of civilization since, well, I guess it depends on where you want to start the clock on something like that. But that's not what we're going to do in today's episode. We are going to get a little bit into the more philosophical elements, but I did think it would be kind of fun just to, what's funny is fun is not even... All right, I got two things that I want to talk about before we get into things as it relates to this. While a lot of the ridiculousness that we're going to watch, right, is funny. I unfortunately as a creator, it's funny is not my lane. Clever, ironic, sarcastic, dry humor, I do a little bit of that in the course of the show because it's part of my personality and it's entertaining. But one thing that I do differently that other people don't do is I really try to understand another side, another perspective, and which I think gives me the ability to take things apart in a way that other people can't or don't. And I will say, despite the annoyance, despite the fact that I'm completely opposed to the political aspects of it. I'm completely opposed to the cultural aspects of it. It's not to say that I'm not without sympathy for people. And I think one thing that we'll kind of see as we go through the videos, and as I was kind of curating some to do for this episode, is, there's a range in all of these things, and there's a tendency within these things to, when I say these things, I mean social media and the way the kind of content that rises to the top, right? And the stuff that's very shareable and clickbait. I mean, really for this episode, I went through my bookmarks on Twitter and then also went onto the Libs of TikTok page, right? Because they're a curator who kind of puts out the most outlandish and crazy things that people say. And what's fascinating about our world is some people turn on a camera and they do great shows like this one, and great shows like the types of podcasts that I appear on. And then some people turn on their camera and they say the most horrible, mixed up things into that camera for the rest of us to see. And it's this very weird thing about the world that we live in, where in general, I as a kind of a joke, but in truth, there's a truth to it. I say, like, I try to use my powers for good. I thoroughly enjoy people who are very good at humor and mocking things, and I don't think that that's for evil per se. I don't think that's for evil. But what I mean to say is it's tough for me sometimes to make fun of people. So, but we are gonna analyze these videos, and frankly, people are putting this stuff out there in public. So that's enough consternation. Before we get into the videos as well, the other point that I wanted to talk, and this is the philosophical part of me, as I can't really help this stuff, is there is a line that we need to draw here, right? We need to draw lines around things in order to understand them. Otherwise, things are just empty space. It's one of the big differences between what is broadly referred to as leftism and what is not. So one of the lines that we need to draw, and this is and I like to put these things into little, I guess you could call them, I like to put these things in terms of poles. Like I take two words that are similar, and so what are the differences between those words? What are the similarities between those words? Where does that tension lie? Some people might call it like a dialectic, but to the point is, I'm trying to glean something here, and that word is degeneracy. It's a word that's often thrown about, especially these days, especially in Pride Month. And also it's a word that carries a lot of weight, but again is also so commonly used to where it can mean anything. Obviously, degeneration per se is probably defined somewhere, something to the extent of like decay, involving decay and devolution and basically the breaking down of something. Okay, so that's like that's a definition we can kind of work with. In a cultural sense, it generally refers to the degeneration of a broader culture, of a broader society, in terms of morals, ethics, mores, taboos, and so on and so forth. And we certainly see a lot of that, don't we? When it comes to what we might encapsulate and call degenerate behavior. But the other word is debaucherous. Because I'm not a saint, right? Like, I like to go out and have a good time. And, if we're talking about some sects of Christianity that like reject alcohol, I am a very bad person because I thoroughly enjoy the substance at times. And I'm also not afraid to indulge at times and have a little bit of fun and, go out there and just have a good time with the boys. And I think that's incredible. I think that's incredibly accurate way of looking at things. I don't necessarily view having a good time as being degenerate. It's debaucherous though, right? That's what debauchery is. The difference, and that's going to be our entry point into this episode, the difference of debaucherous and degenerate behavior is debauchery understands that it's not for everybody at every point in time and at all ages. At all ages being very key and operative into a lot of the content we're going to be looking at today. Like engaging in debauchery and having fun, going out drinking, getting too drunk, going to nightclubs, doing all that kind of fun stuff, going to bars, just having a good time. at different points in history that would, that was considered, and, we can look to the progressive movement. It's always funny how you can do that. Certainly, right, like prohibition had to do with the idea that alcohol was was a degenerative force on society. And so, obviously attitudes have changed since then. So the line between degeneracy and debauchery is that debauchery understands that it's not supposed to be the apotheosis of society, right? You go out, you get drunk on Saturday, you go to church on Sunday. That duality of man, if you will, is the line between degeneracy and debauchery. Right? Or you go out and have a good time. Let's say you're a secular person, you don't go to church. So, you go out and then you go volunteering, or you donate to charity, or you do that. We're both of these things. One, debauchery, in the case of our example here, recognizes that there are higher callings and higher values and higher virtues, hard work, hard work, charity, as we said before, all these sorts of things that are beneficial to society at large. And those are, in a certain very real sense, more important than just having fun. Degeneracy is, for the purposes of our conversation, the indulgence in maximal debauchery. It is looking at those things and saying, well, I only want to have fun. I don't want any responsibility. I don't want to owe anybody else anything. And moreover, I don't owe anybody else everything, but other people owe me. It is entirely self-indulgent. It is entirely turned inward with no regards as to second and third effect consequences. So that's the groundwork I wanted to lay before we kind of go through some of these videos here. And I thought we would start. I will be honest, I don't love this guy's podcast, but hey, I will shout out and always respect Hustle and respect the fact that, he's come up with a format that a lot of people are interested in. I've never watched one of his episodes in full, but I've definitely seen the clips, and that's going to be one of the first things that we watch in this episode. So this is it's called the Whatever Podcast, and what he basically does is he gets a bunch of not always, but a lot of times a bunch of very attractive young women, club girls, maybe I've only ever seen the clips, so I only ever see the dumb things that are said. So, these aren't necessarily podcasters per se, or academics or experts in any field. They're just normal people, normal women, we might say, a certain type of woman as well. And basically he gets that guy, he gets a bunch of these women on the show with one other dude who tends to be a little more on the traditional side, and then, chaos, as they say, ensues. So this is one that was popular a little bit ago. I thought it would be fun. The overarching theme here is, again, is the way in which, we're just going to poke fun at people's expense.
Chase, would you rather smash the hottest trans woman in the world or the oldest woman in the world? Honestly, bro, the oldest woman in the world, because then I wouldn't be gay.
What? You really just want me to just rip you a fucking new one. I swear to God.
Are you Chase, how dare you be transphobic?
Yes, actually. What the fuck do you mean? Yes, that was so unnecessary.
Because if I had sex with a trans woman, I'd be having sex with a biological man, and I don't.
I mean, so far we're pretty much accurate on here, and this is the interesting tension of the show. And we got a video about dating up here in a little bit, so it sets that up nicely.
I want to do that.
The question is,
that's not what you said, though. That's fine.
Because I'd be gay if I had sex with a biological man.
That's not gay. And I don't even care if you're doing this for whatever, but shut the fuck up. Actually,
I'm doing
you look
it for
like you have a little
respect
his street
that's too far.
identity.
Why don't you make me shut the fuck up? Because I have an opinion that differs from yours.
I'm not gonna be a part of something that's starting to say shit like that.
She's right. I mean, that's really hateful, bro.
She's not. It would technically be homosexual.
So this is what
a trans woman is a biological
constitutes.
Man. It's true.
Fuck, dude,
this is what constitutes edgy content.
It's not fucked up. It's real.
That's
it's
his.
true.
Okay,
Two of the
if
women
you
have
guys
not
want to
walked out.
respect
Factual.
gender identities, that's his though. That's his sexuality.
Any opinions you want, but
I'm not allowed to say that. I'm not allowed to say that.
Yes, from a biological woman who doesn't even have any trans friends, that was too fucking far.
What?
A man of God who doesn't judge a Christian,
Yeah, you know what God said? It said He made them man and women. He made them man and woman. I just told you I'm not gay. I'll pass on that. Thanks, though. Who knew
So
that
clearly,
stating biological?
this show is designed to court controversy and viral moments like this. What's hilarious, and if you're listening to this and you haven't seen the video, I encourage you to go check out the video version of this on Substack, Rumble, or YouTube, maybe Twitter, depending on when you're listening to this. And we're gonna see this throughout as well. This is a spiritual thing for people now. That is the time that we live in, and that is what we need to understand when we're dealing with the woke. These are not rational actors taking. These are not rational actors or people, or rather, it's not that they're not rational actors, because that's being too simplistic. That's the kind of analysis you get elsewhere. It's not that people are being irrational. It's that the basic morals, again, that line between degeneracy and debauchery that we talked about before, is that the moral center has split. There is at least two major, entirely different moral foundations. One is based upon inversion. That's what intersectionality is. And the other is traditional, to make it as simple as possible, Christian norms. And you might be listening to this and you might not consider yourself a Christian or even a believer, but that doesn't mean, but if you are and you're listening to the show, chances are you are somebody who understands that there is good and evil in the world, or there is good behavior and there is bad behavior, right? And because I think without that, there is no without something like that, there is nothing we can do to understand the world, right? It's a very intuitive thing, and that's what I think some of the more honest atheists, what they do very well is they say, well, we can just take the teachings of religion and we can teach them in a way that isn't religious in nature. And I would, this isn't the episode to adjudicate that response, but it is the inversion. It is the inversion morality of queerness and wokeness against a broadly Christian perspective. That there are things in this world that are true, that there is an order to things, and that there is a nature to things. There is reality. Reality isn't something we get to play with like the settings on a video game. It's something very real. And to not live in tune with reality is to be a degenerative force. But science isn't enough, right? And this is one of the and that's why and not to say that there aren't people for whom science is enough, we might say, that can still lead a generally ethical and moral life. But what we see with this new spiritual moral foundation in the woke is how they can layer it on top of things like science, like, let's say, I don't know, molecular biology, which is going to be the next video that we watch here. This next video, again, this one's courtesy of Libs of TikTok, is this is definitely an episode, if you're listening, that you're gonna want to watch the video version, because it's you really got to take all of this stuff in, the not only the way people sound, but also the way that they look, because frankly, if you think about it, they all kind of look the same.
For those of you who don't know me, I am a medical school professor specializing in molecular biology. I also have an extensive background in gender studies and queer studies.
Really, we couldn't tell. They always look like this. They always have it's
The idea of sex as an immutable characteristic is a turf talking point that's been around for decades.
Okay, so the idea of immutable sex, the idea that there are that there are men and women, is a turf talking point that's been going around for decades. If you're lucky enough to not know what turf means and you want to stay that way, you're going to have to skip forward about 10 seconds. But what turf means is trans exclusionary radical feminist. So these are feminists a lot of times very much second and third wave, the very man-hating, rejecting traditional masculinity, rejecting the idea that there is anything good to be found within the idea of patriarchy and really men in general. And basically what they say is that trans people are men trying to invade women's spaces. The term TERF, and I pay close enough attention to know these things, has only come into play about 4 or 5 years, within the past 5 years, maybe 6. It was not around decades ago. Whatever, people talk with rhetorical flourish all the time, especially people who, let's just say, aren't the brightest bulbs in the shed. And just because you have a specialty in something like molecular biology, as we're going to see as we analyze, as we break down this video, is not enough.
It's been weaponized against trans women in particular in the fashion of, oh, but you will always be male and therefore invading female spaces. Sex as it pertains to humans is a
So sex as it pertains to humans is a construct. That's what this individual is saying. And they're going to explain why. And then I am going to very easily explain why they're being dumb.
construct. It is a set of spectrum variables with bimodal distribution that we draw an arbitrary set of boundaries around into 2 broad categories.
I'm sure you've heard this a lot. I think we all have.
Draw an arbitrary of
that we've all heard this a lot. You know, it's an arbitrary category. So let's go through this again. It is a set of spectrum variables with bimodal distribution that we draw an arbitrary set of boundaries around into 2 broad categories. And what are those broad categories supposed to be? Men, obviously, men and women. Now, why might we assume that these things are brought into categories of men and women? We might, I don't know, look with our eyes and see what biologists call dimorphism of the species, which is to say that men and women, human men and women, males and females, look significantly different from each other. There's variability. That's what bimodal distribution means, by the way. That it is also funny. Bimodal distribution was something that Jordan Peterson talked about a while ago. And so we see now it's even incorporated into the lexicon and the defense for queerness. Because it's not about logical cohesion. What it's about is maintaining the inverted moral center. So that we draw arbitrary set of boundaries around into 2 broad categories. Well, where do those boundaries come from? You know, sure, we can, if we want to pretend to be 18-year-old college students again, we can pretend that everything is arbitrary. But for those of us who actually pay attention, for those of us who actually succeed in this world, for those of us who actually spend our time doing things of merit, as I'm sure most of you are, listening to this show, because otherwise why would you enjoy this kind of great content? You understand that no, some things are just some things are just the way they are, right? It is the fact that, you know, you got a 6'5" guy and a 5'2" girl. The 6'5" guy is probably just going to be able to lift more weight more often. Not in every case. That 6'5" guy might be obese, but and the 5'2" girl might be jacked. However, on average, that holds true in terms of things. And of course, you know, if we take an evolutionary perspective on things, forget the revealed knowledge of religion for a sec. Let's take the modern one of the more modern interpretations for why we're here. If you look at evolutionarily, that makes sense too. Again, it makes sense that we would look with our eyes, hear with our ears, see, taste. I guess taste might be a weird one, but it's somewhat accurate. We would use our senses to notice the differences between men and women. One of the most fundamental differences in human existence, and that fundamental difference is then interpreted symbolically, masculine and feminine, and the entire thread on which any of this stuff holds any merit is that masculinity and femininity are ideas. And one thing we do here is explore ideas, and we talk about how it's difficult to draw lines between them. It's not always so easy, right? Symbolically speaking, one of the more popular ones would be yin and yang, the idea that you have a little bit of something in everything else, of the other in the first thing. So These are fundamental to the human experience, to the way we perceive the world. All of our modern contrivances, modern cultural attitudes, norms, language, terminology, rhetoric, education, what we consider to be our civics, all that is just software on top of this deep-rooted thing that we have within us as humans. But this molecular biologist is telling us that, what were the words again here? It is a set of spectrum variables with bimodal distribution. And from a certain theoretical standpoint, you could argue, and I'm sure this individual would, that, well, everything is just made up of atoms at the end of the day, and if we combine those atoms into certain things, into different things, then we could change the very fabric of the universe. Theoretically, sure, let's say that's possible. But we ain't there yet, and we're nowhere closer. And I don't think we'll ever really get to that point the way some of these more modern, but by molecular biology people would say.
Characteristics. Almost all of those characteristics can be changed through hormones or through surgery. This is literally an argument that gets trans women killed, and is the thing that people are using.
So according to this individual, and we'll move on to the next video after this. According to this individual, you can change everything through hormones and through surgery, but that's a dude. You can just tell. They have certainly tried to effeminize their voice through taking hormones. Certainly they have they're overweight, so they have more of a gender neutral vibe, let's say, which is very common. It seems to me to be a guy. Now, okay, maybe if it's a girl, then yeesh. Well, yeesh at that point. But again, it's one thing to what they just believe that what this is that they just believe that you're just this shell of a thing and you can be made into you're just a lump of clay. You're not anything special. So the only way to make yourself by being born is who you are. So the only way to make yourself special is to become something else. This next person is also some kind of academic, maybe, or at least certainly tries to pass himself off as that. You're gonna notice here. I wanted to move from some more academic defenses to just some crazy shit that was going on. So let's listen to this next one, because this one in particular is lovely just by recognition that most of these people, what they really are, they're not queer, they're not gay, they're communists. And that's really who we have a problem with on this show, are woke communists.
One of the reasons why cis people think they're real or natural or the default is because they've fallen into the trap of the myth of white supremacy.
So not because cis people are the ones that have children. Cis, by the way, is a Greek root that means normal. So if you ever really want to mess with somebody, you could just say, yeah, I know. And when they say, oh, well, you're cis, you don't understand. It's like, no, I understand, I'm normal. And then when they say, what you say that's bigoted, I'm like, you just called me cis. That's what that means, because that's what that is. It's like a Greek root for normal or regular. So it's not the fact, by the way, so from what this person's arguing is it's not the fact that, normal people are the ones who have children and have therefore propagated the species throughout eternity, right? We might say, or at least human history, and really the history of all living things as far as we know it. It's not the fact that that dimorphic sexes with individualized gametes is one of the most successful breeding patterns out there. It's not that. It's white supremacy.
Yup. They're connected. So if you think things like trans women aren't women, or if you call people trans but then refuse to call yourself cis if you're cis, that means that you have been influenced by one of the original influencers.
This is actually a neat little rhetorical trick that they're doing here by one of the original influencers. So what they're doing is they're trying to minimize like passed down knowledge.
The twin siblings of colonialism and the myth of white supremacy. And those twin influencer siblings get paid by capitalism to influence. They have literally influenced you to believe that there is a version of a man and a woman that is more human than all the other versions. Sound familiar?
It's not that they're more human. It's that it's what most humans are. It's called a norm.
Yep. White dominant culture, colonialism, capitalism, they've been working real hard on us. Remember, just like with any influencer trend that is toxic, we don't have to believe it and we don't have to follow it. And in fact, we can even point out the ludicrousness and make it completely obsolete.
Good luck is what I'd say if you're going to try to make normalcy obsolete. But they are trying, as we're going to see here. It's really, what's fascinating is in my lifetime how it's reached the highest levels of American government. Really in such a short time. It is that old adage about bankruptcy, that it happens slowly and then all at once, right? Because the building blocks have been there for a certain amount of time, but it's really only been over the last decade, we might say, that we've seen the acceleration of it. This person as well is, again, this is why the visual aspect of the show is helpful, because once again, very boyish look, but it's a woman. Regardless, that's just what it is. Next, I wanted to take a look at our good friend, Sam Britton. If you don't remember who Sam Britton is, well, he was this individual that you're seeing on the screen. And this person was proudly promoted in the Biden administration as a queer, non-binary, I don't know, some dude that is into hanging out and is into wearing a dress and then hanging out with dudes wearing dog masks, which is a sexual fetish if you didn't know. And this, of course, very powerful figure, this bald dude that would like to wear women's clothing. It's funny. It's worth me taking a quick diatribe here and say, I'm somebody myself who has at different points in time, I've never cross-dressed. I've never had any interest in that, but I liked to push. These days you tend to see me in black, right? Just something I decided to do a few years ago. But before that, I used to wear a lot of color, very flashy, very preppy, but then also I would try and push things a little bit. I used to have long hair. And so depending on your upbringing, wearing pink, things like that. I did musical theater growing up. I was in the performing arts. I was a singer. And depending on who you are and where you come from, a lot of these behaviors would be considered pushing quote unquote gender norms. Of course, it's a question of, I like to dance. Not every guy likes to dance, but I do. But that's a cultural thing for me. It's from my family. We it was something that I learned, and it was something I enjoyed doing. But again, boys play, what's the stereotype? Boys play football, girls play ballet. Girls do ballet. But there's wearing pink and making pink part of pink like your color. And then there's Sam Britton. Okay? So it's one thing. Of course, and then there's this great picture with Rachel Levine, who of course gets to wear a military uniform because for some reason we do that with the CDC or whatever frickin' branch he's in. Because again, obviously a dude. But Sam Britton was supposed to be this awesome non-binary person who was moving up the ranks of the government until they got arrested for stealing women's clothes. Because, of course, somebody who purposefully transgresses societal norms about the clothing that men or women wear is somebody who is going to push other boundaries of society. That's the line of degeneracy and debauchery. Do you see? And that's the problem with the inversion morality, which says everything that was once bad must be made good. And, of course, that's what we have today. This next one, and again, I want to, because again, this person seems young, and there is just a part of me that I feel for these people. I see their confusion. I can remember going through puberty and being a teenager, and again, and frankly, I'll be honest for a sec, I was bullied a lot actually growing up, and I was also bullied and people would call me gay a lot. It was never true. So I can understand why people would do it. So again, it gives me a little pause to try and take these things out. But again, we have this nondescript, attempt at a gender neutral look, which again just tends to make girls look like young boys and guys look like ugly women. But, which is a problem for ugly women, if you think about it. But this is about the whole pronoun thing. Now, we've talked about pronouns in depth, but what's crazy about this TikTok is it says my pronouns throughout this year. And I can't help but look at something like this as I'm not that old, but I am 30, as a clear cry for attention on the part of the teenager. And it makes me sad because I think in a lot of these situations, these people are probably, they get into these sorts of online cultures and stuff because they're lonely and because of the problems of today and, and various other cultural issues we can get through. But still, it's a little ridiculous that, in January they want to be called, all right, let's see. In January they want to be called she, they. It's actually a horrible video to watch, so I'm just gonna scroll through here to the end. In January they wanted to be called she, they. So again, we can see from the picture it kind of looks like a boy, but we know it's a girl just by looking at the facial features because that's how reality works. Then it's she, they again in February, but in March they switched to they, she. Same thing for April, but then in May they wanted to add they, she, he. June, they, he, she. July, they, he, she, z. That's XE. Ugh. August, they, he, she, z. They, he, z. They, he. December is left empty. Why are we trusting somebody like this with anything? Again, this person's probably on the younger side. Maybe let's hope for the sake. Let's hope that, let's hope they're on the younger side, and let's hope that they can make it through something like this. But god damn. Sorry, Lord. It is ridiculous that we should think people like this should be at the forefront of who should make decisions about what is appropriate to teach children. Our next video, might just do a couple more of these, and then we're gonna wrap up after this. So I'm gonna save this one. There's this one of a girl saying how she wants a basically she's saying she wants a traditional man, but there's no liberal traditional men. There's a darker side to all of these sorts of things, right? I've got a video in here of somebody saying puberty blockers doesn't do anything. But of course, if you weren't paying attention, you might have missed that a Pride event happened at the White House.
Yeah! Welcome to the White House.
Thank you.
Happy Pride Month. Happy Pride Year. Happy Pride Life.
Yeah!
Transgender children.
You are beautiful.
You are heard.
You belong.
You are understood.
You are loved.
And you belong. One of the bravest and most inspiring people I've ever known.
You're welcome.
Good folks.
Can we take a little video? Hi, Mr. President. It is an honor. Trans rights are human rights.
This was put out by some trans individual. I will say, they did a good job dancing there with the trans flag. And then, of course, if you didn't see, I don't know if it's in this video or not. But if you didn't see, they also then posted like a picture of them topless on the Rose Garden, which again, not saying some crazy stuff hasn't happened in the halls of the White House, but there's a time and a place, and it's not publicly out on social media for everybody to see. Of course, this is all culminated in a tweet sent out by President Biden that said, "Today, the People's House, your house, sends a clear message to the country and to the world. America is a nation of pride." And of course, we see the illustrious pride flag that's dominated everywhere this month, hung from the Rose Garden. Now, I'll be honest, I saw that, I cringed, I rolled my eyes, I thought it was gross. There's just symbols matter to a society, and the symbols of especially government institutions, especially in an age of ours that is so secular. So this is a clear meaning. This is a clear shift in politics and in what's going to happen next in politics as well. But the picture just showed the rainbow flag. What I didn't realize was that it was flown in between American flags. This really reminds me funny as it might sound, is the Anschluss scene in The Sound of Music, which is where the captain comes back and the Nazis have taken over Austria, and so they the Nazis have taken over Austria, and they're flying the flag of the Third Reich. It's very reminiscent of that scene for me. Look, whatever else there is about people, like, at the center of a country should be that country's flag, especially in the U.S., which has built so much of our ethos and mythos of the United States is centered around the flag. And so this was meant as a clear signal to the nation that things are changing. The reality is one way in which we can laugh at this stuff. Obviously, we're talking about it in the show, but really, what you have to do is just become comfortable with the fact. Like, how do you deal with this stuff? You have to become comfortable with the fact that there is this shifting moral narrative in this country, and it's not a good thing. You have to become comfortable with the fact of drawing lines, even when people tell you that those lines aren't supposed to be drawn or that they never should have been there to begin with. Without these things, we can't hope to succeed in any sort of battle against the woke, because that's what we're gearing up for, and for better or worse, in the 2024 presidential election. You know, a lot of people like to throw words like unprecedented around. I do think the 2024 race is unprecedented, and part of it is because of this cultural shift. And the reality is, when you really take a close look at these things, as I have, you realize that it's a lot of sad and lonely people at the center of these sorts of movements. And what's unfortunate is that these sad and lonely people have chosen an evil ideology to get behind. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, taking it to the woke a little bit, kind of examining their behavior, their arguments, and all these sorts of things. If you liked it, do me a favor, share it with somebody that you think might like it too. Don't just share this episode, especially with anybody. This one's definitely a little bit more not safe for work, as it might be. Go share this show with a friend. I would be incredibly grateful if you would do something like that. And of course, if you're not subscribed at beenawake.com, subscribe to the Substack. That's where everything goes out first. And you can follow me on all social media at the LB Moniz.
If you like what you heard today, go to beenawake.com to subscribe for future updates. My name is LB Moniz, and I am not one with the woke.